So, hello everyone. Welcome to session All Things Life. This episode 2 is in All Things Life, All Things Love and Relationships. A very exciting topic for all of us. And just some basic instructions. I know many of you joined us last time, so I won't repeat those. Those are basic Zoom guidelines. But just one thing for people who are new. So we'll end the session at 9 p.m. more or less, depending on the venerable, of course. When we move to the question and answers, one way to ask the questions is that we go to reactions, which is on the bottom bar, and raise your hand, and I'll unmute you. Okay, that's one way. The second way, if you feel hesitant or if you feel shy, you can just write in your questions in chat to me if you want to keep it anonymous, and I can ask those questions. Of course, if you ask those would be better. But if you feel shy or hesitant for some reason, you can just write the questions and I'll make sure to ask it to the venerable. If your question is not asked and it's not done before 9 p.m. IST, don't worry, you can always come to next session and ask it there. Okay? And yes, I'll also request you to please keep your videos on and your microphones off. That would be very nice, of course. Yes, so that we can emulate the physical classrooms atmosphere. Yes. Thank you very much. I'll just spotlight Venerable and record this.
All right, everyone.
Recording in progress.
Okay, so then I'll put mine back to gallery because I don't want to see me. It's silly. All right, you people, I'm happy to be here just for this little hour. Let's make the most of it. And we just think before we start to sort of put this motivation into our mind. We're going to be here for this hour together to listen with an open mind, to listen for advice. This is the point. It's got to be practical. And what's the advice for? Well, the most simple way of putting it, as far as Buddha is concerned, we've got this amazing potential for clarity and wisdom and less anger, less fears, less neurosis, more love, more compassion, more kindness, better life, in other words. This is the bottom line for the Buddha. So we think we're going to take some tools from this, even if it's 1%. Think, fantastic, put that into practice so we can benefit ourselves, so we can be of benefit to others. Whether it's a relationship with one person or with the whole universe, you know. Okay, so it seems like, isn't it, the relationship is a very kind of powerful thing. If you look at the universe, including the animals, we all seem to kind of, relate to each other. We have these very intense relationships with each other. And so, of course, the relationships are the most intense ones with our mummies and daddies and with our so-called partners, with the ones we choose. I mean, the style of our lives, and many animals are like this, is we find a person, usually one, whom we share our life with. We have all these structures in our cultures. We call it marriage, whatever you call it, So we know, of course, these are the relationships that naturally where the most happiness could be, but also the most suffering. There's no question, So why is that? Let's look at that. Let's look at, in other words, take the Buddhist view. And we discussed the general idea about the mind last week. A lot of it was technical, but let's just look at the experiential aspects of it. And if we've read even one Buddhist book, we're going to be familiar with this, But before we start, okay, no, not before we start, we're starting. So the Buddha's point about the Buddha's view of the mind is so specific. When we say love, compassion, generosity, anger, depression, we know these words. We are intimately familiar with them. But we tend to sort of think of them as just kind of vague emotions. But especially if we're serious psychologists, we don't talk in such simple terms. We have these more complex concepts, and these very complex theories. But the Buddha's view hasn't changed in 2,500 years, and that hasn't changed much since even before like I said last week, the amazing Indians before the Buddha. He was brought up in this extraordinary system, and then he went as far as he could go, and he diverged in his own direction, in relation to his own very specific experiential findings about the nature of who we are, what we are, and what's possible, So the Buddhist model of the mind, which is based upon, this is not coming from Buddha, he didn't invent it, it's coming from the amazing research, internal research of the previous yogis. It's very simple, almost deceptively simple, He divides the contents of all the thoughts and feelings and emotions. We know our mind is full from the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to sleep, and then throughout the night. And sometimes our nights are more turbulent than the day. We don't remember much of it, but that's our mind, our experiences, our consciousness. Our thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, instinct, intuition, this entire spectrum of our inner being, this is our mind. And the Buddha's expertise is the methods to become intimately familiar with these contents. Now, why should we do that? What's the purpose? I mean, there's all these cliched ideas. We have a cliched idea of why a person meditates, We have this cliched vision of it, a person sitting there looking holy with incense and lights. I mean, it's just so cliched. The whole point is actually it's expressed by the word Buddha, which is the end result of this amazing journey. If you're on the Mahayana path, it's the end result of this extraordinary inner journey. And this is what underpins all the work of a person being a Buddhist or even using 1% of Buddhism. And it's indicated by this word Buddha. It's so marvelous. The etymology of it is so delicious, The Sanskrit word Buddha, I don't speak Sanskrit, and nor do I speak Tibetan, but the equivalent Tibetan word Sangye. Well, the first syllable, and this is so powerful, we don't just hear it as religion, it's extraordinary. The first syllable implies the utter eradication from our being, from our mind, of all neuroses, all fear, all ego, all jealousy, depression, anxiety, worries, all the stuff that we are intimately familiar with, and which, I would suggest, we all take as an absolute given, as a real, solid, kind of definite, concrete part of who we are, so concrete and so solid and so real that the idea that if you can get rid of it is like cutting off your hand, because our assumption is a normal person has some anger, some depression, some jealousy, some sense of whatever. So it seems weird to think, you mean Buddha's saying we can get rid of all this, that we should? I mean, that's a shock to us, especially if we're used to the psychological models of the modern world. It's a shocking idea, but we don't just hear it as, oh yeah, wow, that's nirvana. You see, that's the meaning of nirvana. But we mystify all these religious words, and we should not. That's why I say I'm very blunt sometimes, because I think it's so important to rip this stuff to pieces and put it on the earth. This is real advice, serious, practical. And don't think of spiritual as some airy-fairy thing in the sky. Yes, there are esoteric levels of it, but what does spiritual practice? What part of you? Your mind. So Buddha's expertise is the mind, So not only can we rid our mind of all neuroses, and we'll go in a minute to why we should want to, we can not only that, but da or ge, sangye, Buddha, the second syllable implies, and this is the Mahayana view, the development to perfection, literally, of all the other parts of our mind that we are also familiar with. Love, wisdom, clarity, compassion, self-confidence, joy, you name it. These are at the core of our being. This is Buddha's finding. And therefore, if that's the end result, it's obvious all the work to get there, the methodology, is the key method, the key job, and this you could argue is what defines a person as a Buddhist, is the ability to distinguish in your mind between the neuroses and the other stuff. Now, it's a simple statement. So why is it so difficult? Because Buddha would say, and we have to remember this, is his view, we don't come into this life brand new, like a blank slate, and then you proceed to be produced by your mother or everything else. You come into this life fully programmed with some certain tendencies from your own past habits. This is Buddha's view about reincarnation. Such a mystical idea. It's his view. It's his own direct experiential view that we produce ourselves. We are the producers of ourselves. Every millisecond of what we think and do and say produces the person I become. So we come into this life. Now, our problem is, of course, if we believe we're made by God. I mean, I don't know about you Indians, but I don't think you'd like to blame God for anything. And certainly we love to blame our mother and father, particularly our mother. I'm being a bit sarcastic. In the materialist world, because naturally the view we have that appears to be true is that, and that's reinforced by our scientific views, that we are the product, we are the handiwork of these two people. And where do they come from? Grandma, grandpa, back to the monkey. So that's naturally where we track. So if we want to know why I'm angry or why I'm jealous or why I'm good at music, perhaps, we naturally look there. We look outside. Now, Buddha's not arguing the outside doesn't play a role. It's pretty evident it does. The major point he makes is the outside world, the mother, the father, the external world, the people who do things to you that are nice or not nice, they're not the main cause of your happiness and suffering. Your own mind is. That's the simple point the Buddha's making. Now, these words are not complicated, but it's immensely difficult to apply them because everything is shouting at us that it's the opposite. because we've practiced to perfection these neurotic habits, these misconceptions, Buddha would say. They're wrong assessments of reality. He's not being moralistic, he's being practical. It's like you believe that 1 + 1 is 3 for so long that you just can't imagine anything else. So it's really hard to unpack and unravel these misconceptions, and that's the key function of these states of mind, these neurotic ones. So let's look at these, because these are, you know, we all want a good relationship. We all want to be happy. Whether you're sitting with yourself having your own breakfast or with somebody, we want it to be pleasing, harmonious. Everybody wants that, you know. So here, this is essentially Buddha's methods, Buddha's recommendations for how to accomplish that. And this is the simplest level. We're not talking bigger levels of happiness like nirvana and Buddhahood. Just talking ordinary, you know. So the key thing to understand then is this Buddhist model. And this has come from you Indians before, you know. He didn't make this up. He brought it with him. And you've discovered this, the yogis have discovered this experientially. It's not just some speculative theory. That the contents of our mind, our mental consciousness. Okay, we've got, this is an interesting point already. We've got sensory consciousness and we have mental consciousness. Sensory consciousness and mental. And the thing is, because we are so addicted to our bodies, we make the body the boss. The feeling, all the experiences we have day to day are totally, you know, dominated by the physical, because the physical plays such a powerful role. We think of ourselves as this body. We might hear intellectually that our mind is not physical if we take the Buddha's view, but it's pretty intellectual for us. You know, we feel the effects of our mind in our body, especially our emotions. Look at us, you know. So so they've got sensory consciousness and mental. This is already fascinating. This is already very telling. So I'll use a simple example, you know, and I'll say to you, wow, that's a really nicely well-designed thermos. I like the look of this thermos, I'll say. So naturally, without much analysis, we would assume that Rabina's eye consciousness, her eyes, are seeing a well-designed, pleasing thermos. Well, Buddha says, don't be ridiculous. Sorry, mate, but your sensory consciousnesses, the word consciousness and mind are virtually used synonymously, okay? But they're used in different contexts. So here we're talking about the 5 sensory consciousnesses. Let me spell it out. Remember the fundamental point the Buddha's making, that your mind is not physical. Don't believe him. It's just his own observation. So don't believe him. Just, that's interesting to think, and we'll take it as a hypothesis here. That includes your eye consciousness, your ear consciousness, your touch consciousness, your tongue consciousness. There is the tongue, there are the nerves, the eyeball, all the bits and pieces of the body, but your eyeball doesn't cognize. The word cognize, the word to know, the word to be aware, they're all the verbs that point to the job of our mind. Every state of mind, every millisecond, there's something going on in our mind, and that job is to cognize something. So the sensory consciousnesses actually are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition, but we give them immense power. So, you know, eye consciousness all the sensory consciousnesses have only very limited objects that they can cognize. So eye consciousness cognizes only shape and color. That's it. So then you've got to ask the question, well, I wonder what part of my mind is cognizing a well-designed thermos. Well, that's your mental consciousness. You've got your sensory and your mental. And as the mental consciousness, that's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa puts it. That's what Buddha's expertise is. That's what we have to unpack and unravel and become intimately familiar with. And eventually when we get shamatha, to be able to have this brilliant skill, you know, to unpack and unravel the stuff in there and eventually rid the mind utterly of all the delusions and fully develop all the goodness. Speaking simply, a many lifetime job, but that's the point. That's the goal. So then the mental consciousness, so where does that come in this experience of a pleasant cup? So within a millisecond of my eye consciousness landing on that black shape and color, within a millionth of a second, and I'm not joking, quicker than Google, your mental consciousness is accessed. That's where the workshop is. That's where all your memories are. The Buddhist view would be, there's not a millisecond of anything you've ever cognized since beginningless time, and we're not just talking this life, that isn't stored in your mind. Nothing goes astray. Everything is stored. That's what we call memory. And yes, the brain plays a role, but the point the Buddhist view is we come into this life programmed already with so many memories, you know, from past lives. But we can't access 99% of them because we live at the gross level. So within a millisecond, my mental consciousness is accessed, and what's in there? All the thoughts, the feelings, the opinions, the viewpoints, all the all the emotions, all of that's stored in our mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is. So that a nice looking thermos is a conceptual story made up by my thoughts. I see shape and colour, that's it. Now, this is very sobering. If that's the way we see the world, then we know very well we don't think that. If I look at handsome Fred, I don't notice anything in my mind, my emotional hunger, the attachment, which we're going to talk about. I just see divine handsome Fred, and I believe that shape and colour is divine and handsome. Well, I'm sorry, it's trade away nonsense. It proves that it's a conceptual story, because next week when he cheats on me, how does he look to me now? Revolting. So clearly they're conceptual stories. So that's the level of mind we live at. We live at the level of conceptual stories. So, and then now this is the point. Now with a mental consciousness, the Buddha divides all the contents into three categories. Precisely. There's no fourth. There are those that are neurotic, deluded, delusional, disturbing, miserable, I-based, fear-based, the ridiculous rubbish that Buddha says we can get rid of eventually. And why should we? Because they're misconceptions. They have a function of being a misconception. They distort and exaggerate whatever appears to us. And they are the source of our pain and suffering, and they have no basis in reality. The second lot are the valid ones, the virtuous ones: love, compassion, kindness, intelligence. These are the ones that are reasonably valid, relatively, until we realize emptiness. They're conventionally truthful, valid, reasonable states of mind. The first lot are the source of our pain and suffering, the main source of our pain and suffering. And the second lot are the main source of our happiness and our goodness. I mean, this is almost seems too simple for us, you know. This is not the model we use in modern psychiatry or psychology or neuroscience. Now, the third category, what are they? Well, you know, normally speaking, one of the terms that's used for these three categories are negative, positive, and neutral. So neutral sounds like they're indifferent. No, it doesn't mean that. Here, this third lot are neither negative, they're neither neurotic and disturbing and distressing, nor are they virtuous and virtuous states of mind. But that doesn't mean they're not important. So that's why I prefer to call the third lot the mechanics of the mind. They're the parts of the mind, whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need them. So a murderer and a meditator both need attention, intention, concentration, discrimination, alertness. There are many of these. I mean, this is the Buddhist approach. And these are the ones when we develop single-pointed concentration, that we hone these to a brilliant level of degree, because we use these, the mechanics of our mind, if you like, my way of putting it, are the ones that we use to do the job of being clear and distinguishing between the neuroses and the virtues. So, of course, we don't point to these parts of our mind. If we wanted to, we could point to the parts of the brain, but that's not Buddha's expertise. He's not interested in the brain. He's talking about the mental, personal, subjective, cognitive process itself. That's what we have to become familiar with, because it's there in those conceptions. We live at the level of conceptuality. It's in those conceptions that is the source of our happiness and suffering. That's it. That's the background to the job of then being your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe puts it, which sounds so cute, but it's profoundly true. And of course, it's the hardest job we'll ever do, only not because in its nature it's hard. It's actually quite simple to change your mind from delusion to virtue. It's only because we're addicted to the delusions that makes it so hard to change them. They're deeply, instinctively, primordially in the depth of our being. So we need to be very humble and patient with ourselves, you know. So, okay, now there's thousands of these states of mind, and we know this very well. We're going to test to that from the second you wake up in the morning until the second you go to sleep at night. The mind, you must have had hundreds and thousands of thoughts, but they're so crowded together, so speedy. It's just like this big noise, isn't it? And we just vaguely hear the big pleasant noise at some point, or vaguely the unpleasant. But we don't have any much more analysis. We don't give any. We don't pay attention to the thoughts that underpin our feelings, and this is the crucial point that makes it so difficult. So, okay, because we're so addicted to our bodies, and because our body and our mind are indeed inextricably linked, interdependently linked. In other words, you can't possibly have, you can't have a cognition of eye consciousness, of shape and colour, unless you have an eyeball. So, but it's not the eyeball that does the work, but it works with the eye consciousness. You know, if your eyeball is not there, your eye consciousness might be there, but it can't function. It has to have an eyeball. It depends upon an eyeball. So the mind and the body are like that. We need, at the grosser level of our being, we need a brain to work properly. If the brain's all mangled, then the mind comes out all mangled. But the brain and the mind are not the same. I mean, this is intellectual, interesting concept. But the real job of it, as a background, it enforces, it reinforces and informs the way we work with our mind. So then if the neurotic states of my mind are the cause of my suffering, and I know I don't want suffering, and if the love and compassion and kindness and generosity and forgiveness and patience are the cause of my happiness, then it's obvious my job is, one, to distinguish between them and to lessen the first lot and to grow the second lot. That's the point. But this is the job, and it's an enormously hard job. Not again because in its essence it's not difficult. It's only difficult because we've been doing the opposite for so long. So, okay, there are thousands of these states of mind. You talk about in the text always, you hear about these 84,000 neurotic states of mind. Of course, Buddha didn't use the word neurotic. He didn't speak Greek. But, you know, in our psychology, every fancy word is in Greek. God knows, I mean, I don't know how you Indians use it, but we all use the Greek words. So anyway, these are unhappy states of mind. There are thousands. But the Buddha, as we very well know from reading any of our Buddhist books, we're going to hear about the 3 poisons. Well, it sounds so cute, doesn't it? Oh, you don't go to your therapist. Oh, I got the 3 poisons. Surely just shut up and go home and wait till you want to kill your husband before you come back to her. I'm joking, but get my point. So what are these 3 poisons, you know? Well, 3 toxic emotions, why not? And the point is, this 84,000, I must say, it's very funny. I often ask the Geshis, what text am I going to find the list of 84,000? And they say there doesn't seem to be a list. Well, I mean, Buddha talked about it, so there must be there somewhere. Maybe we've got to cobble the list together ourselves. I don't know. But it's so interesting. The young Ling Rinpoche, I mean, I don't know if you've had him down there in Bangalore. Has he taught at the centre, young Ling Rinpoche? He hasn't. Anyway, you know, he's the reincarnation of the root guru of His Holiness. A marvellous, marvellous young Lama. Speaks perfect English. I'm sure he speaks perfect Hindi as well. Brought up at, you know, Drepung down there. And anyway, he travels a lot in the West, and I've never heard anybody else say this, but it must be in the text somewhere. But he always says these 84,000, they're rooted in these 3. They all subsume to these 3. So 21,000 of those neurotic states of mind are rooted in the root delusion called ignorance, the first one. Next 21,000 are rooted in attachment. Next 21,000 are rooted in aversion, the 3. And then the next 21,000 are rooted in all 3. So it's kind of a really kind of clear presentation of the neurotic states of mind. So of course, if we study the text that's called Lori, which is studied in the monasteries, it mentions 51 states of mind. And these are certain ones that are selected that are said to be quite appropriate to the main ones, you know. So then the 3 poisons, even if we can begin to become familiar with these, even 2 of them, I swear to you, you could have a profound understanding of your mind and indeed of other people. So what are those 2? Well, the 3 are as follows. Ignorance. I mean, we've only got an hour, got half an hour to go, but I'm okay. Ignorance, which is the name given to this primordial, deeply ingrained misconception that posits and grasps at a solid, concrete, separate me. Then on the basis of that, there's the main one, effectively, the Four Noble Truths says, effectively, this second one, attachment, is the source of day-to-day suffering. This is like a joke to us because we use the word attachment in such a different way in our daily lives. So we need to understand the Buddha's take on it. So then on the basis of attachment, then you have aversion. So now let's look at attachment and aversion, because these are why we suffer in our relationships. This is the point. This is why we suffer. These are why we suffer. The main reason. Yeah, your husband might be a creep. I'm not denying it. You know, that's not the issue. We're not discussing the external here. That's just the condition. We're looking at the internal. This is our job. Okay. So what is attachment and what is aversion? We need to understand these. We need to know what Buddha's definition is, not ours. Well, first of all, there's conceptual states of mind. This is hilarious to think that anger is a concept. When you see a person shouting and yelling and screaming and spit coming out of their mouth, their eyes wide in horror, oh, she's having a conceptual story, we think it's a joke. But this is the point. We only notice these states of mind when the body is involved. And this is the tip of the iceberg. It's the physical indicator of what is going on deeper down in our habitual states of mind. This is why it takes time to become familiar. And this is why in the Buddha's packaging, the Lam Rim, as we are very familiar, the very first level of practice, don't look at your mind yet. Buddha's getting us to control the servants of your mind. Harness your body and your speech. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't jump on the wrong partner. In other words, don't harness your body and your speech, which are the servants of your delusions, and at least stop following those delusions and harming others. This is our first level of practice. And we can't really begin to see our mind until we've harnessed the body and speech to some degree. I mean, it's obvious. If you've got a 6-year-old kid and he's screaming and punching and kicking, and you tell him, sweetie, sit down and look at your mind, it's a joke. You've got to help him harness his physical energy first. Then we have the luxury of noticing what informs our body and what informs our speech. And this is how deep it is, because we can see we do and say things spontaneously. We don't even notice what's going on in our mind until it's out the mouth. This is why the job is so difficult, being our own therapist, you know. So, okay, what is attachment? Well, ego grasping, the root delusion, is this primordially deep one, the root such that when you have uprooted it by realizing emptiness, that's when you really have cut the root of suffering. You've got more work to go, but that's the amazing job to be done. So on the basis of this primordial concrete sense of a separate, independent, real, concrete, pointable, findable me, deep in the bones of our being, the main voice of that, and this is the one effectively in daily life, this is called attachment. So what is it? Well, first of all, as a result of practicing attachment for so many countless lives, we're born into this life programmed with the deepest, most energetic level, the consequence of this attachment, which is the profound feeling of dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction. I don't have enough. I haven't, no matter how much your husband tells you he loves you, it's not enough. How much money in the bank, it's not enough. How much you lose weight, it's not enough. How much you change your face, it's not enough. How much, things you get, job, things, it's just never enough. And we're talking second by second by second. It's the primordial disease of having practiced attachment that we're constantly dissatisfied. So, of course, when it's really strong, especially these days, modern world, that's what we mean by self-loathing, because dissatisfaction is not only I haven't got enough, but I am not enough. And that means I am loathsome. My nose is ugly. My mouth is ugly. I am ugly. My mind is ugly. So the view we have of ourselves is so utterly tragic, and this is the point. This is the point. Because these are such deep habits, we believe the story that this dissatisfaction tells us. We never question it. We never say, well, maybe I'm not so bad after all. We would never say that. Someone else will say it, but we don't believe them. We'd rather believe the bad. Our mind runs like a magnet to the bad. This is the irony of attachment. It's the function of dissatisfaction. So the thing about attachment and the relationship between the next one, aversion, is so intimate. And we're almost discussing it now. Attachment is this emotional hunger that feels I'm never enough and don't have enough. So it propels us then, therefore, to look for something. And the obvious level where you look is out there, the objects of the senses. That's the first level of attachment. So naturally, you're feeling hungry, which means you're missing something. So then where is it? So it's out there. And depending on your habit, it's going to be food, bodies, handbags, money, more subtly, reputation, all these things. It's constant and unceasing. It's the motor that drives us every millisecond. And this is the animals and all the beings as well. So attachment is the primordial hunger that it feels they haven't got enough. Then it's this overt hankering, craving for something. Then it's within that, built into that attachment, is the belief that when I get it, I'll get happy. Because the bottom line for all of this is not, the bottom line of attachment is to get what it wants. Because why? Because we believe absolutely without question that then happy feelings will come. Then I'll be satisfied. Satisfied sounds very boring version of happiness, but essentially it's what it is. You stop the pain of the dissatisfaction. And we're talking such subtle levels, so be patient with ourselves. We're talking the subtlest level. To be finally rid of attachment, you're practically enlightened. You're not, but I'm just saying. So this is deeply instinctively ingrained. It's the motor that drives us every second. It's not just occasionally attachment pops up, oh, I'd like a chocolate cake. That's just a gross manifestation of it. It's this emotional hunger, really. And why would you be hungry? Because you're missing something. So you're looking for it out there. This is the gross and obvious way that attachment functions. This is what Buddha means by being in samsara, And the point about it is Buddha's not being moralistic. That's how we hear it. You know, Lama Yeshe, and then because we conflate attachment and the object with happiness, we put all these together. We conflate them. Then when we hear, as Lama Zopa says, when we hear the Buddha says, sorry guys, you've got to give up attachment, we go, oh, I've got to give up my happiness? I've got to give up my heart? Because we think they're the same. No, they're completely different. This is why it's so important to study the Buddhist model. It's quite precise. Happiness is a feeling. There's nothing wrong with happy feelings. Lama Yeshe would say the more happiness, the better. It's the feeling of well-being, of satisfaction, and of course it can be also blissful and joyful. There are a spectrum of it, but that's what we're wanting. We don't want the cake. We want the happiness that we think will come when you get the cake. But this is primordially programmed in us. We don't analyze it like this. So the reason Buddha says attachment is a problem, he's not being moralistic. He's not saying you shouldn't have happiness. He's not even saying you shouldn't have the cake. He's saying it's a misconception. It's driven deep in the bones of attachment because it's so ancient. It's just a complete misconception. It's a total lie. And this is where the problem is. The attachment is the hunger that drives, I'm missing something, that drives us to search for something. Then when the attachment gets the object, the handbag or the boy or whatever, or the new nose, whatever it might be we're attached to getting, believing when I get it I'll get happy, then attachment, first in the mind, attachment's already fantasized it. That divine new nose, that divine new boyfriend, that divine new handbag, that delicious chocolate cake. Attachment's already completely got a perfect visualization, meditation of the object. And then you have to use all the other parts of your mind to get the object obsessively. So one of the functions of attachment is emotional hunger. The next function of attachment is this kind of control, manipulate, frantic, to get the object. It also, the crucial part, the part that's the killer, is attachment. The stronger the emotional hunger, the bigger the lie that attachment is telling us about the object. It'll make the object look absolutely divine. And then, of course, the worst part, the killer, is we believe that story, that it is in its bones divine, and that when I get it, I will definitely, finally get happy. That's roughly the analysis of attachment, and it's running it's there continuously to one degree or another. In fact, it's so continuously there, it's like at the level of an assumption. It's at the level of an assumption. So we just follow it continuously. And this is the point that's hard to prove and see, but we have to look. What the Buddha is saying is this: because it's a lie that the object isn't what attachment thinks, when you do get it, in the end, all it leads to is disappointment. And we know that. Use the simple example of a chocolate cake. A simple example of that piece of that food, the chocolate cake, whatever. The story is building up. The emotional hunger is intense. And we confuse that with our physical hunger as well. The empty stomach, but the emotional one's the main one. And it's like everything in you is just absolutely desperate to get it. Okay, we'll behave nicely. Won't be like 3-year-olds who burst into tears and rush to the cake and grab it. We'll try and be more polite, But it's driving us completely. And the conviction is absolute, that it is utterly, divinely delicious. It looks like it's almost like vibrating deliciousness, just begging us to eat it, and not a millimeter of our mind is questioning that picture. That's why, as Lama Zopa says, it's bad enough that we see something in a wrong way. The worst part is we believe it's true. That's what keeps us paralyzed in samsara. So one of the most profound levels of practice is to observe the attachment, to know it's an ancient habit, and to know it is not true. And the fact is, we prove every day that it's not true, but we forget. A cake is an easy example. You put the cake in the mouth, and so what happens? Naturally, because of the way we're constructed, it will trigger a pleasant feeling. Now, pleasant feeling, happy feeling, or unhappy feeling, this is a really crucial point. We can spend an hour on just this. Well, we can spend a month on just this. This does not belong in the negative quality aspect and doesn't belong in the positive. It's in the mechanics. It's just the way we are, the way we're constructed. We have happy feelings and unhappy feelings. So nothing wrong with them. They're not negative or positive. But we think we conflate, not only, as I said before, attachment with happiness, we also conflate the object. So we mix them all together in one big lump, So we've got to start to unpack and unravel all this. So, of course, we're talking human beings now and relationships. So what's added, what's involved? Okay, I've got to prove, first of all, we've got to see how we can prove straight away that the cake is not intrinsically delicious. Because after 4 pieces, how do you feel? This is so immediate. Maybe it takes you 30 years to fall out of love of your husband. It takes 4 pieces of cake to see the proof of that attachment is a lie. Because if this is the point, if attachment were a true analysis of the status of the cake as something divine and delicious and the cause of happiness, it is logical, Buddha's pointing this out, that the more you eat it, the happier you'll get. This is so evidently not true. We know even the second piece triggers slightly less pleasure, but we're still not satisfied. That's why we go to the 3rd piece and the 4th piece until you have to stop, because now the cake looks so repulsive and you would vomit if you ate it. And now what happens? Tomorrow we forget all about that. We remember only the cake is divine and it's going to cause me happiness, and we try again. We forget completely that it caused me to vomit. We forget that. So we're just such junkies, This is what attachment is. It's junkie mind. I'm not being sarcastic. Addiction is attachment for the Buddha, just that it's a question of degree and a question of the object. So, of course, now we look into relationships, because cake doesn't mind if you shove 5 pieces in. Cake doesn't mind if you vomit all over it, doesn't it? But now we're talking human beings. This is where the tragedy is. Now look at the world. It's obvious. Look at the world, So we have it. So then, next to attachment and aversion, thank goodness, we have access to our virtues. They are our saving grace. If you have any semblance of a decent relationship, whether with your child or your beloved, it's because you've got love, compassion, forgiveness, patience, kindness, etc. If to the extent to which you suffer is equal to the extent of your attachment and aversion and the other dramas, and the extent to which you're happy is the extent of your love and compassion and kindness. This is a very precise, clear statement, and it should be very revealing for us to hear this, But it's a bit shocking, because we're convinced we're happy because the boyfriend's so divine, or we're convinced we're unhappy because the husband is mean and ugly. Now, Buddha's not arguing the boyfriend might be a lovely, kind person and the husband might be a creep. That's not the discussion here. It just makes it more difficult for us to see what's happening in our mind. And that's our job, That's our job. So the trouble is attachment and love. It's like they're together in a big soup. It's like they're the same. It's like not only a big soup, we've got some attachment popping around with some love in the soup. They're pureed. They're pureed together like perfect lentils. Perfect dal, mixed together. You can't tell the love from the attachment. And we don't even think that they're different in our culture. So how are they different? They're like chalk and cheese, as the British would say, the Australians say. Utterly and completely different states of mind. This, again, is a unique approach to the Buddhist model of the mind. In other words, if you had mainly attachment and not much love, how would you be? You'd be a vampire. You would be what the world calls a psychopath. I'm not joking. The more delusions you have, the more attachment, the more aversion, the more arrogance, the more all the other nonsense, the less love, compassion, kindness, to temper those things, the more psychotic you are. These are the fancy words we use in modern psychology, all these Greek words, I'm not joking. And as well as being born with no ethics and tendency to kill and lie and steal, add those to it as karmic habits. So it's the presence of your love and compassion and kindness and generosity and forgiveness and humility and patience, that they are the source of anything that goes on that's good in your life. This is what we have to first understand theoretically. And then if it's true and you want to be happy, you better start learning to look at your mind. Of course, it's difficult. It's incredibly difficult. But this is the job. This is the job. So what's the difference between love and attachment? Well, love is in the second category, and it's called a virtue. The key characteristic of these states of mind is because the negative ones are rooted in the ego grasping. They're rooted in this neurotic, primordial, fear-based sense of a separate, concrete me. So they're all dualistic. whatever word that means to us. There's me and there's that stuff out there. There's this terrible sense of separateness. The stronger the delusions, the more the sense of separateness from everything else. The more rigid and concrete and set in stone everything is. The more we are related to love, let's say. So what is attachment? The definition of attachment, it is a conceptual state of mind that exaggerates the deliciousness of an object. That's a definition of attachment. What's the definition of love? Love is a conceptual state of mind, same conceptual state of mind, that is the thought, may you be happy. When you see happiness, another person happy, you delight for them and you want them to be happy. That's love. So of course we can grow that infinitely to the point of becoming a bodhisattva, and then the other one, we can get rid of that completely. So, but the trouble is they come like they're mixed together. You know, you don't have love. You don't want. So the only people we want to be happy are the object of our attachment. And the only ones we are attached to are those that we love. So that's why we think they're the same. And they come together, but they're completely different states of mind. So then you add that to that, the strong karmic history, because the Buddhist approach about karma is that there's no accident. It's a natural law that runs the universe, so nothing can be random. If you understand botany, you know that whatever grows is not a random event. It fits with the logic of botany. Well, the same here with the law of karma. So we come into this life programmed, one of the 4 ways that karma ripens is the tendencies in our mind. So if we come into this life with very strong attachment and strong anger, and then very strong karmic connections with certain people, and due to past killing and stealing and lying, let's say bad ethics, then you're going to have a very intense negative life. People are going to harm you, kill you, lie to you, steal from you, be mean to you. So you've got the karmic tendencies and then the experiences. You've got the tendencies, and then you have the karma from the past habits of non-virtue. You've got people who do those things to you. So this we can see very much as our lives, We have the tendencies in our mind, and then we have the people we meet in our lives, whether it's the rapist, the kind husband, the rich friend, whatever it might be. The tendencies similar to the cause is what's in our mind from past habits, and then how people impact upon us. So due to past ethics, bad ethics, then we're going to be lied to, stolen from, not to mention lie and steal. Or you might have one of these or not the other. You might get born with a lot of good tendencies, but due to some negative karma, you'll get lied to, stolen from, beaten, harmed. So there's 2 separate tracks here, and it's so important to understand these. So, of course, having the bad things happen to us makes practice 20 times harder. Of course it does, That's why we have to understand karma, at least the basic mechanics of it, and understand the way the mind works and know how to distinguish between the so-called negative and so-called positive states of mind. I mean, we've got 15 minutes left. I've given a big fat overview. Now I think it's really good you ask me some questions. And we're going to carry on these conversations, so don't worry about it. We've got lots of time. So now ask me some questions, please. Any old questions, I don't mind.
If anyone wants to ask a question, they could raise their hand, or I have questions in the chat, I could ask them. So till you are raising your hand, I'll ask this question that I've been asked in the chat. So someone's asking that if all the discomfort, pain, desire is a result of my mental tendencies, is in my mind, and all I need to do to become happy is to change that mind, then what would be the motivation to change the outer circumstances at all? And then how would we make any progress in the world?
It's a really good point. It's a marvelous point. It's a brilliant point, The Buddha says if you can change anything, please change it. But what if you can't? The real point is, if we're on the bodhisattva path and we're really practicing the bodhisattva path, first of all, from your own point of view, you would, if you're so developed that you realize your mind is the problem, then you would be able to live with that shitty wife, or excuse me swearing, mean, ugly husband, because you've got some karma with that person, and they're there to teach you, and you learn about your mind, and you'll be the kindest person on the whole planet. That would be amazing. Now, as for the second part, it's a really good question. If you're on the bodhisattva path, my dear, you want to make the world beautiful for people. You want to make the world marvelous so you can become a mega rich king of the universe to make people happy. That's what would motivate you. Compassion. That's the point. From your own point of view, you want to rip out the delusions, and you won't try to harm others, and therefore, but you want to make the world different based on bodhicitta. That's the point. Based on bodhicitta for the benefit of others. So you might just talking ordinary level. You see you got delusions, and you see you got a you want to do something useful. The two wings of the bird. So you think, I'm going to become a doctor. So why? Not just to get rich and famous, so you can help others. That's what motivates doing things, to change things for the sake of others. And we can see it on the planet. The people who really help the world, not just for their own benefit. They try to make the world better using this brilliant intelligence we've all got to help others. That's the point. That's the Hope that helps.
Yes, Venerable. Venerable, we have more questions in the chat.
Good, go on then.
So we have the next question is, so it's a two-part question. First question is that you're saying that our suffering is never ending? First question is that. And the second part to that is, then how do we accept others even though we know they're bad to us?
I understand that. The first one, of course, suffering is ending. That's the whole point of Buddha's teachings. That's the whole point. That's why he's presented what he has found. He has the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering, number one. 2, there are causes. 3, there is a state called cessation of suffering. You can get rid of suffering and its causes. And 4 is how to do it. If it were never ending, you might as well just give up now. Don't bother. Don't waste your time listening to these boring words, Of course it's ending. That's the whole point. But it won't end until you do it. As long as we follow attachment and follow all the misconceptions, it will never end. That's the point. But if we start changing, that's what put atomic bombs under it, and it will end eventually when we've achieved our own liberation from suffering and its causes. So the second one, this is the trouble. So let's analyze karma for a second. There are 4 ways in which our past actions ripen in the present. The first is the type of birth we've got. So let's just take that. We're assuming there's you as a human, and there's another person in your life who's a human, let's just say, and they're mean to you, let's just say. Could be your mummy, could be your next door neighbor, could be your boss, whoever it is. So you're both human. You both got that due to some past virtuous karma. Now, second track of karma for you, let's say, is your for the other person as well. But let's talk about you. You've got these tendencies. Let's say you're trying to be a good person. You understand the Buddha's view. You're trying to give up attachment, give up anger, give up depression. You're doing a very good job, but you're in this awful relationship. You've got this. This is where this is the third karmic track playing out. This is called experiences similar to the cause. And that means, however, you're seen and treated by others. We've got to see the difference. And sometimes that can be such strong in relationship. You're stuck with that person until the day you die, maybe. That's the intensity of the past history you've got with that person. And the way they're harming you, that's the fruit. So your mind is the fruit of your good virtues as well as your other rubbish. But this one is also the fruit, in this case, of your own harming that person. Karma's personal. So now it's happening to you. This is the same with our happiness. Some people have marvelous relationships. They have a husband who adores them until the day they die. That's called the experiences similar to the cause of that person's past kindness, past truth-telling, past virtue, past goodness. So however we're seen and treated by others, that the karma is called the experiences similar to the cause. And that's what makes life difficult. I mean, like I talk about my friends in prison, who are in prison, unfairly accused of murder, on death row, treated like animals, sometimes for 45 years. That's pretty heavy-duty karma you've got with some person. Because the way people see us and treat us, that's the fruit of some part of our past actions, including our happy experiences. Now, if that's that relationship, that's our practice. That could be our old mummy. It could be your old whoever it is, your sister. We got sort of stuck with this relationship. But that's where, if we have the luxury of choosing to change the relationship, I think in our, especially in Indian culture, but in all cultures it has been, but now we're so degenerate in the West, there's this incredible, powerful thing of the family and honour and duty, isn't there? So most of us, we just feel paralysed. If I've got this mean, ugly mother who's at me every day, we would never think I have the choice to leave her. We think I'm supposed to stay. And because, let's say, in the Christian world, where it's seen as very bad if you get divorced, you're living in this nightmare for 55 years with this person that after the first year of marriage, you couldn't stand each other. That's insanity. So if you've got the power, leave the relationship. That really takes courage. If you can change, if you can't cope with it, if you're not the bodhisattva level who knows this is your main practice and you're going mad, kindly get up and go out of there. But we're very scared to do that because this is part of our attachment. We're worried about what people think about us. Oh, I shouldn't do that. I might upset them. All this nonsense. We have no courage, so we sit there in misery. Neither understanding that we can leave the relationship, nor understanding we can change our mind. This is why we all go crazy, Yes, Subhashini, please talk to me. I'm on. Yes. Can you unmute him?
Yes.
Yes, please talk to
okay.
me. Happy to see you again.
Thank you. In fact, it's a privilege hearing you. What I wanted to ask is that you very rightly described that attachment is this belief that if we get it, we're going to be happy.
Yes.
But also there is the other side of it, that when the attachment in a sense doesn't fulfill your expectations, it can turn to aversion.
That's exactly the point. This is what's so interesting, and I haven't even begun to get into this, but it's such a good point that aversion is the response when attachment is thwarted. That's the relationship between attachment and aversion. And we're actually going between these 1,000 times a day. Even the simplest level, you want your cup of tea and you're all excited expecting it to be nice and hot, and suddenly you taste it and it's not the right taste, so suddenly aversion arises. That's a miniature version of it, but that's exactly right. And this is the tragedy of samsara. We're rushing between attachment and aversion 1,000 times a day. That's exactly the point. Exactly. That's exactly what Buddha's saying. Thank you so much for that. That's a perfect point. Hit the nail on the head. And that's where the pain starts, you know. That's where the real suffering starts. Yes, what else
And
is
you
there?
also said
Yes, please talk.
Sorry,
It's
sorry.
okay, go.
I unmute.
Unmute,
okay.
please.
Okay. Shivashni, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, good. Please talk to me.
what I wanted to also, that you very rightly put it, that if we want that person to be happy without expectations from them, then it is love.
That's exactly right. That's the whole point. Yes,
And
exactly.
And when we are not looking at the person like the chocolate cake
Precisely,
analogy,
darling.
which is-
So
which is
perfect.
really nice.
This is exactly right.
So that is the attachment.
That's right. The attachment is the emotional hunger, the neediness, the expectation, the clinging, the looking every second, worrying what they're thinking about me. This is the horrible feeling of attachment. But when it's love, you know, whatever makes you happy. Of course, it's most painful. To be parents and to have real love must be very hard. In the same with relationships. So this is the point, though. It's so stark. Thank you so much. Yes. So what else, you dearest people?
We have some questions in the chat, precisely 3 questions
Good.
till now.
Come on then.
So the first question is that how to detach from something or someone without suffering, without the suffering of detachment, and does it only take a decision to detach from that thing or someone?
I mean, if you're talking about giving up the person, I mean, I'm only assuming you mean by leaving that person, not giving up the attachment. There's 2 things. There's the object, which is the cake or the person, and then there's the attachment in our mind. So giving up the attachment is the main job, but it's nothing wrong with giving up the object first. I mean, look at the world. You know, if you're an alcoholic, nobody on the planet would expect you to give up attachment for alcohol while continuing to drink alcohol. And this is a good example. And this is the tragedy of our relationships, especially we have all this strong feeling, oh, I shouldn't leave her, I'm supposed to be with her till the day I die, oh, I can't leave my mummy, and we become like these martyrs because we're not capable internally of working on our minds. So we just live there suffering and going crazy. So I mean, it sounds so shocking to leave your mother, to leave your ex, to leave your husband. But really, if you've got courage and know that it's like giving up alcohol. You can't cope with it. You're not capable of it. And more than just, the decision has to be the first part. You won't do anything if you don't decide. But then the painful part is all the suffering from it, of course. But giving up the attachment while living with that person, that's very difficult. And that's why practicing in our relationships is so incredibly difficult. I mean, it's intensely difficult, people. We must not underestimate how difficult it is. That's why we have to have a daily practice. That's why we have to understand what we're doing and learn first, control the speech and control the body. If we could control our speech, 90% of our sufferings would stop in the day because we manage. But as soon as we vomit out the words, the damage is done. And then it's so caught up like in a big mess, you know. And that's why it's so important if we have the luxury of having some space. Your own little space where you can close the door. I mean, why do we think that on the earth, the number that's always quoted is that 40% of females, of women, the 40% of the women who are murdered by the bloke in the same bed. Now, this is not against men. This is showing the intensity of karmic relationship and of delusions. 40% of all women who are murdered by their husband, virtually. I mean, not quite exactly like that. It's obvious. It makes sense, you know. That shows the intensity of attachment and aversion, and it also shows how we are utterly unaware of our minds. So we walk into danger every day. It's like you don't know you're an alcoholic and wonder why you're drunk on the floor every day because you've never labelled it alcoholism. So you keep walking into the bar and wonder why you keep suffering because we're so unaware of our minds. This is our tragedy. We just walk in like fools, you know, and then we get bashed and beaten and wonder why, you know. So we need to develop this awareness. That's why I have such incredible respect for my friends in prison who don't have the luxury of changing their environment. So then your back is against the wall and you are forced to work on your mind. You know, I always quote the woman, always, she's my friend now, she's out of prison, she's old, for 17 years living in hell. Accused with her husband, back in the 70s, she's a little hippie American girl with her 3 kids and a husband, hitching in Florida. They get picked up by 2 guys. Then the police stop the car, the 2 guys kill the police and blame the hippies. So they're on death row in Florida. She was 17 years in prison. She finally got out. Husband was even executed. She went to the execution in the prison. His head burst into flames. You can't imagine one nightmare after another. She had her children. She gave them to her family. The family, her mother and father got killed in a car accident. She lost her children. She was innocent, but she never went crazy. She said, she wasn't even Buddhist. Living in isolation for years. She said, finally, I realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. I decided I am not a prisoner. I am a monk. I am not in a cell. I am in a cave. This is a real human being. And therefore she didn't suffer tremendously because she was powerful in her own mind. She had this emotional intelligence to know she could change her mind. She said, I knew I had a choice. I mean, that is so stupendous, you know, so unbelievably powerful. I use that example continuously. She's this regular, now this little old lady. And she's living with a fellow who was Irish. She lives in Ireland. And he was accused by the British of killing policemen. He got out as well. So now they live together. They're both about 80-something, living in Ireland, helping former prisoners. And, you know, I've met so many people who've been in prison. The emotional suffering of being in prison is unbelievable. The suffering, you know, you've been squashed and down and brutalized. And most people are unaware of their minds. And people are broken emotionally. But not her. You meet her, she's like a little old lady in a wheelchair. You would never know. She had this 17 years of hell because she worked on her mind. I find that such an example, I cannot tell you. So, of course, extreme examples are always very powerful, aren't they? We can relate this to our own lives. So it's 1 minute to go. Our hour has gone like a dream. Were there many questions there, Aman?
Yes, Wendy. Actually, there's many that has turned, which are 5, I would say, at least.
Well, let's give it 5 more minutes. Come on.
Okay.
See if you can summarize them all together. Are they all very different?
Yeah.
Go on. Go on.
So one of them is how do we make another person who steals or lies see
Sorry.
the error
Start again. What?
How do I make the other person who steals or lies see the mistake in their
Oh,
actions?
this is really hard. Oh my God. It's a bit, you know, compassion is the wish to help somebody, but wisdom is the ability to know how. So, you know, it's just, I forget about stealing and lying. Let's just say a person is addicted to food and they're 50 pounds overweight. Let's just say, and they're really suffering. But obviously, the only way that person can take your advice is if they're ready to hear it. If they're not ready to hear it, you're wasting your breath. So that's wisdom. You can see their problem, you can see starkly their problem, but that's compassion. You've got to want you for their sake. But the wisdom in you has to be the ability to know their mind and to know if they're ready to hear it. And otherwise it's just water, you know, it's just like talking to the air. That's really important. And that's why you have to have patience, you know, because there's no point in bashing a person. That's what parents do. They give us lectures all day, not noticing if we're even ready to hear it. And of course, at some point we just blank off, you know. Next one.
Venerable, we have the next question is, could you please give advice on how to enter a new relationship and not getting attached?
Oh, that's like asking me how to get enlightened. I mean, it's just take all the things that I've said, learn to know your own mind. If you want a relationship, I'm happy for you, but learn just to watch like a hawk every day. Have a daily practice. Learn to aspire to watch your mind like a hawk, to be aware of the attachment. Don't even pretend that you can get rid of it. I mean, this is too advanced, but you've got to be aware of it. And then attempt to practice patience, kindness, but don't be foolish, because part of the problem with attachment, because we're so hungry and we haven't begun to talk about this one, it's got to be a topic for another week. The deepest attachment of all in us, the deepest one, the most primordial, the one that takes the longest to go, is the emotional hunger, the neediness, the attachment to how we are seen by others. This is the most primordial. And this is the one that drives us stupendously. This constant craving to be seen in a good light. And it's extremely hard to recognize this. So all I can say is just keep moving one step at a time. Have your daily practice. Be aware of these things. Observe, and then learn from your experiences. Learn from your experience and be brave. And if you want a relationship, go. But want it to be kind, loving. Do your best, but learn from your experiences. Like anything, if you're learning tennis, you've got to learn from your mistakes, don't you? You learn. That's the key point. Next one.
Venerable, the next question is how to develop and grow the virtues in us.
Well, it's another way of the same. How do you develop, if you start off knowing no tennis, so knowing no tennis means you've got all the delusions, and how do you start to learn tennis, which is the virtues? You just have to practice. And you have to distinguish between them. That's how. Next one.
Are bad relationships karma?
There's nothing that we experience in the mind or at the hands of others that isn't the fruit of our past actions. We are our own creator. It's like asking me, is that flower in the ground due to seed being planted? Well, there's no flower or weed in a ground that doesn't come from a seed. There's no experience we have that isn't the fruit of our past actions. All the happy ones and the suffering ones. It's a natural law. So it's a given, yeah. Next one.
So the second part of the question was, can we, by being virtuous, dissolve that karma with that person?
Well, that's the point. That's what practice is every day. But not just that. We have to live in vows and do the four opponent powers, do the purification practices. They put atomic bombs under the old habits. Yes, of course. Nothing set in stone. What else?
Okay, Venerable, this seems to be the last question. It's also the longest and hardest to understand. But the person is asking, and I'll just quote, sometimes we blame our karma for the things in our lives over which we don't have control or the things we cannot change. But the Buddha says that the one thing we can change is our mind.
That's right, exactly.
So do we have the ability to change our karmic tendencies?
Okay, very good point. It's like the bigger the weed in the garden, the harder it is to pull it out. But it is able to be pulled out. If the weed is very small and takes a little bit to pull out, it's the same with our karma. So if you've got very strong karmic tendency to lie, let's say, plus you've got the very strong, as a result of lying, and another level of karma. One karma is how your thoughts and feelings here, one track. So the fruit of past stealing is you continue to steal. Now another result of stealing is that you get stolen from. The experience similar to the cause. If both of those are very strong, it's almost impossible to see it. I mean, it's almost impossible, but if you can see it, then of course the stronger it is, the harder it is to change. But of course it's possible. You just have to practice. It's like a natural law. Of course we blame our karma. Of course you can say, I blame myself. How foolish for me being angry every day, for constantly stealing in a past life, such that I now steal. Of course, blame your karma if you like, but it's not set in stone. It's just your habits. It's like, why is there you look in your garden and it's it's overgrown by weeds. You blame yourself, take responsibility. You've been lazy and you didn't pull out the weeds. But they're your weeds, honey. You planted them, so you can pull them out. It's a lot of work, yes. So the underpinning thing is to have confidence. It's the law of cause and effect. It's not set in stone. Nothing's impossible. But sometimes karma's very strong. Like some friends of mine, political activists from the 60s, for example, these Black Panthers. They're 45 years still sitting in not on death row, but like in isolation, in some of these heavy-duty prisons, just for being a political activist 45, 50 years ago. That's intense. And they're learning to work on themselves and know they can't open that door. That's intense. That's powerful, like my friend for 17 years, So then that's why if you can change something now, what a miracle. But if you can't change the external, you change your mind, and that weakens it. So we have to have long-term patience. It's very difficult. That's enough today, you dearest people. So hope there's food for thought,
Thank
okay?
you so much.
And of course, it's just going to be flooding with, because all the questions come from this, but if we can think about it ourselves, the questions, the answers will come. The Buddha's final point is there's nothing set in stone. Things are very strong, but there's nothing set in stone. And if we can change it out there, do. Nothing wrong. But the real one is change the way we see it, change the interpretation of it. That puts atomic bombs under it. And then, of course, we have to do the purification. And this is so powerful. And at some point, we're going to talk about that as well, daily part of our practice. So thank you, darling people. Much love to all of you. Thank you so much.
Venerable, is there
Yes.
a way to read the story of that prisoner you were saying? Is there a link that I could share
Yes,
with
her
people?
name
'Cause
is
it was
Sunny. Her name is Sunny Jacobs. She's been in the papers. She wrote her memoir. She's Sunny Sunny Jacobs. You just look up her
Sunny
name. She's done interviews with her husband on the ABC, on the radio, lots of things. You'll see her name there. It's very inspiring.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Venerable.
darling
Thank you
people. Much love to all of you. I'll see you if we live long enough. I'll see you all in 7 days. Thank you, sweethearts. Never give
Thank
up.
you, thank you.
Be patient, be confident, be optimistic, and never give up, okay? Jang chob, sem chog rinpoche, ma ke panam ke gyu chig, ke panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gondu pa ba shog. That's it. Goodbye, darlings. Bye. Thank you, sweethearts.
Thank you.